seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side, baby. Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there, somewhere.
I never get it right, do I? Well, welcome to Eating While Honey and Locusts with Jessica Knott, Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, and our guest, Joe from Chosen Few. It's so great that he joins us today from New Zealand. It's just early hours for him. So, you know, today I'm actually going to bring our guests on straight away. I got really excited because Joe sent me and Shane a video during the week, one of his videos he's done before about the Nephilim spirit within the music industry. And that's really important. What I love about Joe's research is the fact that we, Sefer Publishing, Eating While Honey, and all the different guests that we have with Stephen, a lot of that focus is on the extra biblical books with an emphasis on the book of Enoch as well and Jasher. And just the way in which Joe draws out the information is phenomenal, it's fantastic. And he makes it relevant for today, for now, how it affects our lives. And so that's why I wanted to focus specifically on the music industry and Hollywood and how we are living in this prevalent spirit of the Nephilim and just let it unfold for you. And in fact, he's got a brilliant video that afterwards we will launch with this program on Facebook so that you have access to this and his program from there before. And I just want to thank you, Torah community, Sefer community, for welcoming Joe on behalf of Shane, myself, and Dr. Stephen. You've been really wonderful to him, allowing and just loving his teaching. And that's what it's all about, because all of a sudden he's just been entrusted to a whole new Torah community. Thank you for sending him a Sefer, for supporting him in this journey. It's just wonderful. It's wonderful to fellowship and walk with you with this. So let's first bring Joe into the studio, and then we'll bring Dr. P. Joe, Chosen Few, it's absolutely wonderful to have you. Thank you for coming back today.
The honor is truly mine.
Oh, honestly, like I've said before, that the teaching is so complementary. The dynamic that we have, especially when you and Stephen get going with the knowledge and research that you bring, is wonderful. That is so appreciated. They absolutely love that. And it's in season, it's for now. And that's what's so exhilarating about it. So I'm so pleased, although it was short notice and we just got talking, that you're able to make it here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. P, good morning to you. Just trying to get you. Can you unmute?
Yes,
There.
I am. I'm on mute. Thank you.
It's early for you.
Glad you're back with us, brother.
Thank you. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Very good. Very good.
Good.
It's early for Stephen as well. So, yeah. What time is it in Alaska, Stephen?
Well, right now it's 11 a.m.
Oh, okay.
And it is currently 19 below zero.
Wow.
In centigrade, that's about 35 below.
Goodness.
Wow.
Really cold. Well, we're all experiencing. I don't know about you.
We're just coming into summer, so we're totally backwards over here.
Yeah, there you go. How does that happen on a flat Earth? I just don't know. I'll have to work on it.
We need to come to you. But look, I was just really excited about this, and Stephen, because we're talking so much about the extra biblical books and specifically looking to the Nephilim and the spirit. I thought it was really important and slightly different to look at it from the perspective of the music and the Hollywood industry, and how actually there's been practices that stream all the way from times of old, but are involved in everything today. you know, so it's really bringing our knowledge together. I've prepared a slight, it's more graphic as in a PDF, but we can go through it and talk, and guys, just come in with your knowledge as we go through this. Stuart's prepared some videos at the end, but because we've been preparing separately all day, I'm going to have to bring him in to bring those parts to explain it. But let's just go through the presentation today. As I said, let me just enlarge this to make it a bit easier. So this is the truth behind the music industry. And the title in itself is quite intriguing: channeling the drowned spirit of the Nephilim. You know, that makes you quite inquisitive straight away. Here is Aleister Crowley. So before I just go into him, I want to start with a scripture from Ephesians 6, chapter 8, verse 12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm. So we always remember that we are already cognizant of that as we fend for ourselves in this time, as we live, seeing that we live through the spiritual, and it's not only a physical thing, but everything has a spiritual realm to it. And so that's important to set the precedent with that scripture here. Now, I know both of you have so much to say about this man, Mr. Crowley here. You know, between 1875 to 1947, Mr. Crowley, Aleister Crowley, was the highest Satanist of modern era. He probably still is one of the highest ranking Satanists of this era. He had no regrets in saying that he worships who he calls Lord Satan, Lord Hasatan. Even his mother said that he was the most evilest person around and called him the beast. And he gladly took on that name. He referred to himself by that, and also taking on reference of 666. So he doesn't hide it. He exclaims it. You know, he created a hydra bird of black magic, which is so prevalent and seen everywhere today. His motive is to incarnate a new magical era to replace Christendom, to replace Christianity, anything to do with Yahuwah, to do with the line of Christ. And he's known actually as the fourth highest Satanist of, as I've said, this time, and one of the evilest men around. Just before I go any further into that, please, guys, if there's something you want to share. I know, Stephen, in the past, you've said so much about Aleister, Mr. Crowley here. And he has a huge influence in everything that we have today, that we live in day by day. We don't even see it. It's all hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, there are some very interesting aspects to this, to the teaching of Crowley. And, you know, it's very dangerous things, because Crowley is just to the other side of, I mean, if you were talking about the tree of good and evil, he's going to concentrate on the evil side of that tree, but he's on that tree nonetheless, right? And so when you talk about the good aspect of that tree, because it's the knowledge of good and evil, you know, you can see that in studying the good, it's an easy walk over to the evil side. Now, in British history, there's some very interesting things that happened, and there's some people who were interested in things, and I don't think they were really seeking out evil, but they ended up on the far side of that tree. I mean, the first one, of course, was John Dee, the advisor to Elizabeth I. And John Dee was seeking, you know, alchemy. He was seeking hidden knowledge, and he was seeking knowledge of things that he was trying to bring to bear. And he brought to bear some things that were, including numerology, and also the idea of demon summoning. Okay, this came from John Dee. Although I can tell you that actually demon summoning, or the summoning of spirits, necromancy, the idea of summoning of spirits, comes out of the Bible. If you recall, Shaul, the king, Saul, went to the woman to summon the spirit of Shemuel.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he committed a very grievous sin. And this is part of the reason why Scripture says, "Thou shalt not engage in any necromancy whatsoever," because the righteous are resting in peace in a profound silence, awaiting the day of resurrection.
Wow.
And to awaken them is a absolutely egregious offense. And so you're not to ever engage in necromancy. But nonetheless, the idea of making a petition by means of incantation, this is very, very important. You're going to summon a demon by means of incantation, by reciting the same thing over and over again, like
Yeah.
Abba Bara Kadabra, right?
Mhm.
It's actually Abba Bara Kadevara, not
Oh.
abracadabra, right? But that is a summoning. That is a summoning by the word you're summoning, right?
Right.
And so literally, abracadabra is a Father create by the word.
Wow. And there's
Okay.
a song, Abracadabra, isn't there? Reach out to come and get you. That comes to me straight away when you say that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so here you have this concept which comes through Scripture, the idea of what is sorcery initially in its initial presentation in the book of Enoch. It's discussed as incantation, not pharmakia. Pharmakia is a Greek translation of sorcery. But sorcery, as described in Enoch, is incantation. It's done via incantation. Okay, so what happens when you get to the 4th century AD? Incantation becomes a ritualized ceremony for summoning the spirit of the Messiah. This is called the Catholic Mass. And this is done through Latin incantation to summon the spirit of Mashiach to inhabit the Eucharist and the wine, where he will be sacrificed again. He will be executed again at the altar in every Catholic Mass. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, this incantation idea doesn't get really adopted into the idea of incanting demons, at least in the Western world, until we get to John Dee. And now we get this idea of incantation and the summoning of demons. So you can see that by the time we get to Aleister Crowley is taking from a lot of Kabbalistic processes. He's also taking from witchcraft provinces, and he's blending all this together into his own form of Luciferian worship.
Yes.
Which, of course, included total lawlessness. Now, the lawlessness is a critical factor to all this, because if you recall, the Satanic Bible opens up with the phrase, do what thou wilt.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's the Satanic Bible. I thought that was his law that he made.
Well, it got ensconced in the Satanic Bible.
Right.
And he isn't the one that composed the Satanic Bible. That was, I have to remember his name, is the one who composed the Satanic Bible. But the thing about the do what thou wilt, there's a very interesting study on this recently, Jesse, and I don't want to belabor this too long. I just want to give you an introduction. But the fact of the matter is that the thou shalt nots is what creates a prosperous life, an abundant life. When Mashiach says, I give you life and life abundantly occurs under the thou shalt nots. Okay. There was a recent, actually, it's a study that was published in 1934 talking about that in a society where both the men and the women practice virginity unto marriage, so that they're born as virgins, they get married and they're married for life. Yeah. And there's restrictions and penalties for adultery and fornication. Those kinds of social orders expand into rationalism. They become highly productive, very abundant societies, and they quickly eclipse their neighbors in terms of prosperity, in terms of overall efficiency, in terms of capability. They eclipse their neighbors very quickly. The societies that do what thou wilt very quickly collapse. They collapse into nothing because there is absolutely no impetus and no reason to do a thing. They're just sitting there feeding themselves, stuffing themselves on do what thou wilt, and they collapse into nothing. Now, this is what most people don't understand about the current world. You know, I was watching a video today about some open drag show that was sexually explicit in a mall as a Christmas drag show, quote unquote, in Texas, where moms were taking their kids. Okay. Now, when you see that kind of a thing, you might say to yourself, well, I'm outraged at the immoral aspects of it. But it's more important to be outraged about the fact that that is the explicit push to nothingness. Okay? We're in the third generation of societal collapse. It's going to collapse now, and there's no stopping it. And we will be overtaken by societies that don't practice that kind of garbage. It's that simple. So anyway, when you get to Aleister Crowley, one of the things about Aleister Crowley is that he was sexually licentious.
Yes.
Just to say, he sponsored orgies and he did sexual rituals and so on and so forth. Rumor has it, it's a rumor, that one of the people involved with Aleister Crowley was Barbara Bush's mother, and that, in fact, he's the father of Barbara Bush, the husband of George Herbert Walker Bush.
That's right.
Right? And so, you see a lot of things in that community. Now, Aleister Crowley would buy a house up in Scotland, and the house he bought up in Scotland became demon infested because it is believed that they also had satanic rituals that included blood sacrifice up there. So there are the dispossessed Occult of people who were sacrificed in these satanic festivals that are still wandering the grounds. If you read Fourth Ezra, that this is entirely possible.
What was that? The Fourth Ezra just got frozen a bit.
Fourth Ezra, if you read Fourth Ezra, in chapter 7, the 70 verses of Fourth Ezra, chapter 7, from verse 35 to verse 105, you'll see that unsaved, unrighteous souls, when they die, end up wandering the earth. They wander the earth until the time of judgment. They do not rest in peace. That's what RIP is all about. And so, as a consequence, this is where he was. Now, who ended up buying the house of Aleister Crowley?
That was Led Zeppelin, wasn't it?
Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. He bought the house of Aleister Crowley, and he lived there for 2 months. And the place was so haunted and so filled with demons, he went back to London and refused to return to that house.
Yeah. And
so another Satanist moved in, and I don't want to call Jimmy Page a Satanist. I mean, they claim that they sold their souls to Satan, but Jimmy Page was a practitioner of black magic, okay, or sigil magic. That's different than being an open Satanist. He was a practitioner of magic. The guy who moved into his house was also a practitioner of black magic, who, when Jimmy Page tried to evict him because he was a squatter, turned around and cursed Jimmy Page. This happened in 1979, okay? And ever since the curse hit Jimmy Page, he's been unable to produce a single thing. In fact, I don't even think he plays guitar anymore. It's just completely gone, right? Everything's gone. So, and I'm not saying any of this stuff works, but you have to recognize when we get into this, and I hope Joe is going to be able to take us into this well. When we start talking about Hollywood, and I want to preface my remarks with one last statement. I got, practically abused by Hollywood because they knew they couldn't get me to conform to their ideology. And we were told explicitly, you either promote heroin or you promote homosexuality or you don't have a record deal.
That's right.
It's that simple. And the head honcho, not to speak ill of the dead, but a lot of these people are dead now. We're going to have to speak ill of them. The head honcho running the operation for the CIA was none other than Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
And CIA agent Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. So we'll get into that more. But anyway, that's my opening remarks. I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you, Joe. I'm so interested because from your video, you said a lot about the books that he wrote. Maybe you can lead us into that or wherever you want to go, really, because this is about mainstream Hollywood, music and film. There's so many examples of people whose lives have been sacrificed, who have died as a result of this. You take us and show us that spirit of the Nephilim.
Yes, I'm a bit rusty concerning my video. I did that in 2018, and I'm not as fluent as I used to be regarding the topic, but I do have bits and pieces of knowledge that could help.
The good thing, Joe, 2018, that's 1 year ahead of when we started to go through things where the world was sort of waking up more and more. So you've been awake for a long, long time. And to get it at 2018, it means that you were researching it before then. So you might feel you're rusty because it's a couple of years old, but it's in you and everything that you bring out. So I know it's there.
Yes, he's a very Stephen Pidgeon did an excellent job. He's very fluent in the knowledge of Alice Crowley, even more so than I am fluent, and that's a good thing. And yes, he I don't know if he was the original writer of the 777 Quabalistics book, but what I've found out is that the OTO, which stands for the Ordo Templi Orientis, it's a fraternal order for rich folk. They make you famous. The only way you can make it big on their screen or be part of that circle is to obviously sign a contract. And these actors do channel in the spirit of the Nephilim, the disembodied spirits of the drowned Nephilim, and they call these spirits the old ones. Some of them call them the old ones. These musicians, they sympathize for the devil. They believe that, or Gothics or occultists, they all believe that Lucifer was misjudged in heaven. And so they bring up albums, they sing about the, Nephilim and fallen angel, the Banai Elohim worship is riddled through everything, including the music industry and the movie industry. And they're using brainwashing techniques to also get the whole world to also, feel remorse for the devil. And they summon in these, because the Nephilim, the older you go, the older the spirit you go to summon in, the stronger it is, because it dilutes over time. So they try and get the spirits of the drowned Nephilim prior to the flood, and to assert worship. Presidents, musicians, movie stars, anyone that wants to make it big, they summon in these spirits because these Nephilim used to be worshipped by men. So they yearn to be worshipped again. And if you've got a picture of a popular singer at a concert on everyone's shirt, the Nephilim has found his worship again.
Yeah.
And the Nephilim is stitched throughout the fabrics of society and everything. Big merchants use logos, like we talked about previously. In the music industry, they talk about the Nephilim. And it's actually the big elephant in your life. But in order to see that elephant, it requires knowledge. Our clothing brands, it's in our house, the furniture, it's all named after hybrids. And getting back to the music industry, they channel in these spirits of old to assert power or influence over people that will look up to you, and that's not just being a musician, but all sorts of titles. And the brainwashing and we've all been the product of that system, growing up with worldly music, and it's polluted us and polluted our minds. Whatever you see through your eyes and hear through your ears, it turns you into a rotten fruit. And we've all been the product of that. Hence the reason why we have to be born again and be renewed in the spirit. But yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, no, I think it's important because what you've been saying, what both of you have been saying, Crowley and this writing here, 777, he channels it through the knowledge of the third eye, so that these people who agree to this can tap into the ancient old knowledge and spirit so that they gain power today. And I often think of Robin Williams, that he says he sold his soul to Satan and then he died after. I don't think he could get out of it. And that's why it happened to him. Then others come to mind as well. But it's always the factor of, you want to be a well-renowned musician, writer, anything in media, actor, then you have to take this up, because Crowley's book, 777, and all these other fraternities, they teach about summoning the Nephilim spirit. That is a spirit that is being summoned through rituals, which Stephen really went into great detail, so that they can harness that power and that it influences them, but it's also influencing their audience as well. You know, what I found in that book, which I find quite fascinating. So this is the third eye here that you see, you know, but I just want to get to this. This is what's mentioned in his book, page 777, by the way, also. So let him train himself to think backwards by external means as set forth. Let him learn to write backwards. Let him learn to walk backwards. Let him listen to the phonograph records reverse. So again, backwards. Let him practice speaking backwards. Let him learn to read backwards. Everything here is a backward meaning. So obviously there is a satanic meaning of worship and praise. And I hate using those words because we use that in a pure way for Yahuwah, but that's what they're doing here. You know, it's so deep and it's hidden in plain sight at the same time. You know, there's so much more here. Stephen, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, well, this whole idea of backward teaching and backward thinking, all this, again, I mean, you know, I want to be very careful here, Jesse, because Aleister Crowley, like I said, he played in the tree of good and evil.
Mm.
So, for instance, we know that there is a sevenfold doctrine of Yah's whole creation that's set forth in Enoch 93:12. And here Crowley is going to use the 777 as some kind of, you know, to his advantage, display his taking of that which is sacred and contorting it to bring it into this Luciferian realm. But you have to keep in mind that, you know, there are things that are told to us in the Torah, pardon me, that are told to us in the Torah that are extremely important things, you know, and you have this idea of thou shalt not, okay? And the thou shalt nots are what they call a negativist law. And so if Yah prohibits it, you cannot go there. But the rest of human activity is open to you. It's only when someone says thou shalt that you have a positive law and it becomes totalitarian or authoritarian. So in a negativist law, we see that Yah provides a fundamental liberty for all human life, but we are called to follow his Torah and to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and to not fall into those things where he has said, thou shalt not. Mm. Here you have Crowley taking some of the beautiful things of Yah, and he's converting them into dark forces. Now, when you talk about, like Joe was talking about, sympathy for the devil, well, that's a Rolling Stone song.
Yep, exactly.
Sympathy for the devil. And, you know, and I could tell you that Mick Jagger appeared in a you know, satanic dunce hat and openly did a video claiming they're worshiping Satan. I mean, it was open. This is open as you can get. And, you know, when you talk about the satanic forces in Hollywood and the people that have pledged themselves to Satan, it's far worse today than it ever was in the 60s. And it was bad in the 60s, right? Yeah. It was bad in the 60s, but it became far worse when we got into the 90s and into the aughts with people like Katy Perry, you know, Perry, a pastor's daughter, Miley Cyrus. I mean, these are girls that are completely converted and openly cast into the lot of Satan. Lady Gaga. And they're doing explicit satanic worship on stage all the time, constantly. And so you see that this idea of walking backwards, talking backwards. Now, you know, the phonograph records, many of the records, like, for instance, the Beatles practiced it. Yes. I think on Sgt. Pepper, you could run the album backwards and you hear Paul is dead, Paul is dead, Paul is dead. And of course, you know, I have a couple of friends who are huge Beatle fans. And what do they say? They say that Paul, in fact, did die in 1966. I mean, Ringo said this, that Paul died in 1966. And the guy who is claiming he's Paul McCartney now is actually Billy Shears. And, you know, and I have a lawyer friend. In fact, we did a video on this 3 years ago at a macaroni grill in Linwood, Washington. And she was actually quite an expert on this subject. And her research showed that Paul had died in a car wreck in 1966 in Southern California. And Billy Shears took the spot from there. Billy Shears, quite accomplished, right-handed guy who played the bass left-handed, sang, played the piano, and so forth. But they tell you, with Paul being barefooted on Abbey Road and, all of this encrypted stuff and playing an album backwards. Now, it's the same thing with Zeppelin albums. They have curses on the Zeppelin albums that when you play it backwards, you'll find that information. Running an album backward, I don't know why anybody would ever do that. I was always such a cheapskate that, I had a needle that was so worn out, I had to put a nickel on top of my turntable, to hear the record. I wasn't going to run it backwards because I would have killed the needle,
Yeah.
So, but anyway, but Joe's what I'm talking about. Pick up on this, Joe, would you?
Yes. Indeed. They're not doing, they're bold about it this day. It's like the proverbial word gradualism, like stretching the envelope. And, the enemy doesn't come out of the gate and say something they're strictly opposed is what the world is against. They use a Fabian word of the boiling frog scenario, or the proverbial word of gradualism, where they used to do it backwards, but now they're bold about it in their songs, and you can see it in the lyrics. And although with the eyes and the ears, when you watch Hollywood movies and you can't see the subliminal messages or even hear the subliminal messages in the Hollywood or music industry, but below the threshold of your brain automatically decodes it. Okay, it automatically decodes it. But I'm found out that it's not only the words that can corrupt the brain in our teenagers these days. Hollywood and the music industry has stolen our children. That's hence the reason why we have to keep praying for them. And even the tones now, when Stairway to Heaven was produced in Aleister Crowley's house, and it became the #1 hit single of all time.
Yes.
And they use backward messaging, of course, and it's purely designed to corrupt and steal our children and really put all that filth inside the individual as they're growing up. Yeah.
And in this video here, this picture, you can see they point to Aleister Crowley, so they don't hide anything. I wish this was a better image, because it's just before my time, but if Shane were in this program, he would explain the involvement of a lot of these people. I bet that there's a significance to so many of these faces here, as there is with Crowley at the top, the second person along. It's quite amazing, really, isn't it? And as I think, Stephen, you mentioned, when you turn the song reverse, it's serve Satan, which I just find, quite amazing. And it confirms it. There's no more. Even look here, we've got Prince. Now, he was of my teenage era, and I used to love his music. Had no understanding at that time of the spiritual implication of it. But now I do, and, I teach our children, and I can see. And again, his life, it was taken. I believe he didn't want any more in the system, and that's why he was out. Or at least that's one of the theories. Obviously, he died, I think, 2016 or 17, something like that. I'm not too sure now. I can't remember. But if we look at him, this is Prince, 1999. So that's one of his albums there that you see. Again, you can see that it's got the third eye on it. And that's because they have this emphasis of the third eye, because it makes a god of you. So it's for us to be aware of who he is worshipping. This is part of their symbology and making people understand that. But then I never noticed this, and I'm glad that I didn't until now. But when you look at the second image, 1999 turned upside down, it's got the tribute, in a sense, to Nimrod, the missing part of his body, the missing part of a male organ. I never noticed that until now. So much is hidden in these things that, that it shows you what we're talking about here, this spirit that is being invoked, the rituals that they go through, how they are playing with the public, how they are empowering through these people who are selling their souls for fame and for richness. You know, it's
Yeah, no, this goes back, Jesse. I'll tell you, this goes back to a fellow named Robert Johnson. Okay.
yeah.
Robert Johnson was a black blues artist in the, I believe, the 1920s. And he was horrible. And nobody could stand his playing, and nobody wanted to hear him, and he was going nowhere. And then the story goes that he went down to the dirt crossroads at midnight in Alabama, and he made a pact with Satan. Now, this song Crossroads that was made wildly popular by the band Cream, and he's the last verses. I went down to the crossroads. Let's see, run, you kid, run. Tell my friend Willie Brown. I went down to the crossroads. I believe I'm sinking down. So the rumor was that Robert Johnson had made a pact with Satan because he came out of that midnight deal, and all of a sudden he's booked everywhere and he's playing everywhere. And he becomes very, very popular. And I think 3 years later he was murdered. Now, when you look at what goes on in this group of people, you're going to see a lot of satanic ritual murder that took place. In particular, at age 23, I think it was age 20, maybe it's age 27. I don't remember what it was. But Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Mama Cass, etc., were all killed in this age group, right? And I can tell you that a lot of this stuff, and I don't know if we're going to get into it here, but we talk about Laurel Canyon. And so let me just, Joe, do you talk about Laurel Canyon in this presentation?
I've never heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, then let me give you a little bit of background on it.
Sure.
Laurel Canyon is a place north of LA, up in the mountains. And at the foot of Laurel Canyon, there was a log cabin. And this is where Frank Zappa lived. And Frank Zappa was the manager, and he managed rock and roll for the CIA. Nobody wants to talk about this, but this is what was going on, because rock and roll was the whole cultural revolution of the 1960s was orchestrated by a CIA head named Jesus Jones, who had decided in 1959 to introduce unmitigated chaos into American society so that they could overthrow the American dream and replace it with what we have today, a communist, fascist hellhole. And this was the design intentionally by officers of the OSS, or then called the CIA, but formerly a Secret Service agency that was replete with nothing but Gestapo members who had been imported into the United States under Operation Paperclip in 1948. In 1959, they launched this protocol of chaos that they were going to institute in America. Part of this chaos included a cultural revolution that was going to be replete with these experimental drug that they had been working on in the labs called LSD that they were going to promote and exploit throughout the community. And there were two players that were very instrumental in this methodology. Three players, actually. There was Frank Zappa in LA. There was Jerry Garcia in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And then there was Jim Morrison. Now, Jim Morrison's father was the admiral of a ship that was responsible for the Gulf of Tonkin false flag incident that started America's involvement in Vietnam. Okay.
Right.
That was his father. And Jim Morrison and the Doors were working out of Laurel Canyon. So they had Frank Zappa right at the beginning of the canyon. And then behind them, living up in the canyon, were the Doors, the Mamas and the Papas, the Beach Boys, Three Dog Night. The list goes on and on and on and on with all these late 60s stars, all behind Frank Zappa and walking and succeeding with Frank Zappa's direction. Now, Frank Zappa had a good friend who was a gypsy. And this gypsy is the one who introduced the freak movement. And so the freak movement was basically dress like a gypsy, act like a gypsy, use gypsy terminology. And this guy, by the way, was a notorious pedophile. And so in 67, they launched this freak movement, hard and heavy in Laurel Canyon in the LA area. And then in 68, it was imported into San Francisco, primarily in the Haight-Ashbury district. And then in 68, between 1968 and 1969, a whole plethora of bands exploded in the Flower Revolution that would end up performing at Golden Gate Park, what was called the Summer of Love. And they performed in Golden Gate Park, and this included the Grateful Dead. It included Moby Grape. It included Jefferson Airplane. It included the Miles Davis Band. Let's see who else was in there. What was the name of that group? Anyway, I'll have to go back and think about this. But the group that did "Come On, People Now," "Smile on Your Brother," "Everybody Get Together," the Youngbloods, they were there. Country Joe Fish. I mean, there was a lot of bands out of the Bay Area that succeeded in the summer of '69 behind this freak movement. And Jerry Garcia would go to these things and pass out thousands of LSD pills in buckets to the crowd, right? And so this freak movement, this counter revolution, went in earnest and took off like a burning fire. Why? Because it was being funded and directed by the CIA. So in 1968, you had a Democratic convention in Chicago. The Democratic convention turned into nothing but pure chaos, and there were massive riots in the streets in Chicago. Have you ever heard of the Chicago 7 trial?
Yeah.
Briefly, yes.
Yeah, well, the Chicago 7 trial, there's a great film on it. It's absolutely worth watching. Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman were the two agitators. They called themselves Yippies. They were the two agitators behind this, the riot in Chicago. Both of them were CIA agents. Both of them were later murdered. But, Abby Hoffman wrote a book called Steal This Book. They quit publishing it because everybody stole it. And Jerry Rubin wrote a book called Do It, which is an absolute manifesto for riot in the street. And in the meantime, who's leading this philosophical movement but Timothy Leary, also a student of Aleister Crowley? So you see that this unleashing of this satanic movement was lock, stock, and barrel being used by the CIA in order to create chaos in the United States and to overturn the social order. So you have to keep in mind that when we talk about 1962, Jesus Jones initiated this in 1959. 1962 is the threshold year. Anybody who was married before 1962 or earlier, they had a 98% chance of retaining their marriage. There was a 98% marriage retention rate in the United States. It was a little lower in the Black community. It was about 95%. But in the white community, it was 98% at 1962. Okay? By the time we get to 1990, it's a 50% divorce rate. And all of this happens because of this strategic overthrow that takes place in this country following World War II, right? And the satanic music industry. So when you see Prince doing stuff like this, I mean, I can't tell you how many musicians run around covering one eye and doing the Illuminati signal, or they give it, the what we used to call, which is, well, anyway, I'm not going to use the hand signal because everybody will accuse me of being a Freemason or some other stupid stuff. But at any rate, you see people, there were all these Hollywood actors giving the 666 with their hand, covering one eye, doing all the rest of this ridiculous, stupid nonsense. And most of these people, you have to remember that the average musician is so ignorant, they can't finish a sentence. Okay? When you're talking about the average rock and roll musician, you're talking about people that are so undereducated, it's beyond belief. If you want to get an idea of the kind of mentality that goes into the rock band, watch the movie Spinal Tap, and you can see exactly the intellectual quotient of those players. Not to give my brothers and sisters in the music industry grief, but I'm telling you, I've worked with a lot of undereducated musicians. I'm really undereducated.
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah.
Chickens. Yeah. Let me just go to this again, Prince, the all-seeing eye, this third eye that we just covered, so I don't need to go into it, but you can see, and this is on a traditional LP, delirious, free, little red covert. I wonder what those hidden meanings are there. But again, going back to Crowley, this is the second book, the Book of Lies, the Book of the Law. Actually, this is the first one, but on page 77. And it actually reads, and I found this quite fascinating because it's, again, I want to bring this into the spirit that it's harnessing in, that spirit being the Nephilim spirit that it's taking to rule. And on page 77 actually says, all may understand instantly that their worlds, their lives, and every relation with other human beings and every circumstance depend on magic and the right comprehension and the right application thereof. And so when you hear this by the listener, it's a form of worship. That's how deep that it goes, you know. And again, that means one of you guys had mentioned that when everyone is saying the same name, wearing the t-shirt, that type of thing, all the same, the spirit of the Nephilim has found its place again, that type of worship that I'm referring to. And people need to be aware of this. Our children, this generation, they need to be aware of it, and we need to be telling them it. You know, Dallas, he's always saying to Shane and I, you're the biggest conspiracy theorists I know, but we've got to keep that up so that they understand it. When he goes to school, his teacher was saying some of the same things we were saying. He was saying, oh, no, not here as well. But we've got to drum it to our children. We have to, because they will grow and then they'll teach their generation as well. You know, so it's very, very important. This fraternity, how do you pronounce it, Stephen? The Otis Temple or OTO? I don't know how you pronounce it otherwise.
You got me. I don't know, but I can tell you now. See, here with this visual that you have up here. Okay.
Yeah.
You see the visual you have on the right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The visual you have on the right. The inside that triangle is actually a Celtic symbol for the Trinity.
Yeah.
If you go to Ireland, they'll sell you jewelry all day long that has that symbol in it, as it is a depiction of the Trinity. And sometimes you'll see it with the Trinity like this. So you have the three lines of the Trinity, and then this kind of runs down in a circle. You'll see it quite often on crosses, for instance.
Yeah, even on Bibles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll see that as the symbol of the Trinity and the Holy Spirit, right? And you see it in Wales too. Wales and in Ireland, you see those crosses everywhere. And so this is why I'm saying that Crowley, he's doing something where he's taking something which may not be satanic, and he's using it as a satanic device, right? For him to use the number 7, for instance, as a satanic petition is really blasphemy, right? Yeah. But he got away with this stuff because people didn't call him to the carpet. And this idea of, now, here's something else too. When you talk about this kind of triangle hand sign, remember that the Jewish rabbis used to make a similar sign. If you remember Leonard Nimoy used to do on Star Trek, you know, he would stand and we go, you know, nano, nano, or whatever it was. The thing you have to remember is that, pardon me, that hand symbol, when you put the two hands together, the rabbis used to use that in giving the Aharonic blessing because it was a symbol of El Shaddai. It was a symbol of El Shaddai. Okay, that's what it was. And Crowley has co-opted it with the hands closed to give this symbol of the triangle and the Illuminati and the single eye and all this other stuff. Now, the Eye of Horus, when one has to distinguish between the Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus. They look the same, but they aren't. The Eye of Ra is the right eye. The Eye of Horus is the left eye.
Interesting.
Okay? It's a very important distinction. And of course, this idea of the Illuminati at top and all this witchcraft nonsense. Let me tell you something. Witchcraft is a shallow river, very shallow river. So if you want to walk in it, you can. You're going to get your feet wet, and it could drown you. But it is a shallow river. It is not the depth of the belief in Yahweh, and it has nothing to do with the Ruach HaKodesh, which is infinitely more powerful than anything in that witchcraft nonsense. Okay? That witchcraft nonsense is going to bring you to nothing but strife. And I can tell you, these guys who want, first of all, if you're engaged in witchcraft, you're subject to witchcraft because you've acknowledged it. I've acknowledged that witchcraft works. Great. Then somebody can curse you in witchcraft. Somebody can leave a dead bird on your doorstep, curse you in that respect. Someone use voodoo against you and curse you in that respect because you agree with it, because you believe in it, right? When you don't believe in it and you disagree with it and you just rebuke it and you get it out of your life, it doesn't exist. It has no power against the Ruach HaKodesh. None whatsoever. None. And you can also maintain a spirit of discernment. So when you see this kind of stuff that these guys put up, And it's all about symbols, right? They put up these symbols, they co-opt good symbols to make them into wicked symbols.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, I'll give you an
That's right.
example. Led Zeppelin, when they put out, I think it was Led Zeppelin 3, maybe. Might be Led Zeppelin 4. It was one of those two albums. But they put all of their sigil magic symbols on the front of the cover of the album.
Mm.
Now, this was the problem with it. John Paul Jones, the bass player, who's still living, by the way, did not confess Satan, refused to confess Satan, and in fact was a notorious and open Christian. And his symbol was this Trinity symbol, a Celtic Trinity symbol. And you'll find that on the cover of the Led Zeppelin album. Robert Plant, on the other hand, look, and not to give Robert Plant grief, because I think he's got a repentant heart, quite frankly. I think he does. Jimmy Page does not, but I think Robert Plant does. Why? Because Robert Plant lost his firstborn son, which is also the cost of being a Satanist. And it's not just Robert Plant, but Eric Clapton had the same problem, right? His son walked out a 50-story window.
Yeah.
The song Tears in Heaven,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's
That was about his son walking out a 50-story window.
oh.
And the thing is that, we have to keep in mind, there is a cost to Satanism. Not only will you pay the cost, after this life is over, when you will be burning in the fires of hell with the other ones, but you will pay a cost in this life as well. You will pay a cost in this life. And so when these people come out with this lure, oh, you have to worship Satan and blah, 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 blah. Well, no, you don't. No, you don't. Just tell Satan to hit the road. Here, give him a little music. Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started, Stephen. Also, excellent, Stephen. Yes. Also, that the little image there in the triangle, a lot of people say is the triple helix.
Really?
Just something to ponder about. But the all-seeing eye, as Stephen perfectly said prior, is the fall of man when Eve ate off the forbidden tree. The Satanists worship that. The serpent being said to Eve, if you eat of it, it will open your eyes. But he wasn't talking about her literal eyes, but there's oddly by saying there's a third eye that she tapped into, and this is where the eye of Horus comes from, and the all-seeing eye, the eye on the American dollar note, and so forth. It's very deep, symbolic, and on the American dollar note, what I've come to understand is that Nimrod failed, or God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, confused the languages thereof, and the Freemasons have a a symbol of a protractor and a ruler, and they worship the great architect, which is Nimrod, and they that's where that what I understand is where that comes from. And what they're trying to do is complete the capstone on that pyramid on the American dollar note. They want to complete what Nimrod failed by bringing in this, the final beast system.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
they're very close to it. They're very close to reaching their objective now with their techno-fascist agenda that they're going to do with AI and digital currency and social credit system.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've got a song here, and I'll just read out because it's all about fallen angel worship and their demigod children. There's a song from Chris Brown. It's called "Fallen Angel." And to all our teenagers that think we're crazy, about these giants, it's one thing to encourage one person to believe in an invisible God, but it's another to, on top of it, to say, hey, there used to be giants. It really makes us look like really crazy people in the eyes of the world. You know what I mean? So here's the words from Chris Brown. Maybe I should help her mend her broken wings so she can fly again. Remember, this is sympathy for the devil.
Yes.
But I don't want to lose everything that I've gained. So there goes their contract with the OTO. There's that fraternal order.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't want to
Yeah.
lose everything that I've gained. It's turning me a selfish man. Oh, because without her, a fallen angel, my heart just don't go. No more, no more. I can't take the pain from watching her fly away. So say that you'll stay, she's mine. She's a fallen angel, oh, sent from heaven above. She's a fallen angel waiting for me to love her. Yeah, know that she's a fallen angel. So take your judgment of her. I know that she's a fallen angel. Just you will find in every song something biblical, but has been twisted, and it's just evident on top of what we teach. Me, Stephen, also Jessica, and a handful in the world that teach about these tears, the Nephilim, and this. God's word is all about two seeds at war, and even Beyonce
Mm.
openly expresses to the whole world that when she's on stage, a spirit enters into her.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's so strong. She even has a name for that spirit. It's called Sasha. Okay,
Sasha Fierce. Yeah.
there goes the channeling in of an old Nephilim spirit, asserting worship on the earth like it used to when it had its body. And also Michael Jackson claiming to be the king of pop,
Yeah.
you know, unbreakable. I think even up to today, that he must have summoned in such an old one to get that title, the king of pop.
Mm.
And he did many rituals, especially using mirrors to and used to get his songs through his dreams, where he would sleep for 3 days and be on pharmakia to forcibly get him to sleep to get it. That's where he used to get his songs.
Yeah.
And it's just evident to everyone out there right now that are listening to us that we are not crazy. We can back up everything outside the word of God backs what we are saying. You see it in the music industry. You see it in the movie industry. It's all about genetics. The Marvel comic, Hulk, he's made in the lab. You got Wolverine, you got Spider-Man, who's bitten by a spider, and then all of a sudden he's got powers. These are the men of renown, the heroes of old, and we also can, also see that our truth within every mythology around the world, which are described as heroes of old as well. And I just, there's a lot of teenagers that get into these sci-fi, Marvel comic movies, and I was a product of it as well. And but I just want to put a message out there to all the teenagers, man, get the real truth of it. It's more interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Very true.
You know,
And
when you
that's
say that,
true.
when you say, go ahead, Jesse. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Well, I was going to say, when you say that, here you have Nietzsche, who came up with the idea of the Ubermensch, right? The Uberman. We're going to create the Superman. And you have the most wicked man on earth today, which is Noah Yuval Harari. He's the most wicked person on earth, to my knowledge. Talking about how we're going to create a human being that's going to be part human, part cyborg. This is the end of the human era, and we're going to enter into a new beast era, a new animal, a new creation that they're going to create. They're calling themselves Elohim, and they're going to create a new animal that is part human, part cyborg. Okay. Once again, you see the fundamental heresy that when Yah created man, he created man and he said, this is good. This is very good. Right? This is very good. And yet there are people like Nietzsche who come up with the idea of, we can do better than that. We can create a better human being. And so this whole concept of Superman, right? He can leap over a building with a single bound. He's faster than a bullet. He's stronger than steel. He's this, he's that, he's the other thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is an Ubermensch. He is a product that is created that is better than Yah's creation on earth. Okay? And this is where we're going right now. We have these same Satanists, these worshipers of eugenics, these worshipers of themselves that are now claiming that the earth is God, right? And again, this is an old concept. that the earth is God, and they want to go back to creating hybrids. They want to go back to creating Nephilim. They want to go back to the idea of we can improve on Yah's creation. And that's what everything is in the Marvel comic stuff. You know, and I think there's two groups. There's Marvel and there's some other group. I forget the name of the other one. But whether you're talking about, when you're talking, you know, this guy can fly, this guy can turn into a flame, this guy's got bitten by a spider, this guy is, you know, is super strong, this guy's the Hulk, blah, blah, blah. They all mutate. They all mutate to become something incredibly powerful, something incredibly strong. And so you lose, first of all, you lose the idea of true heroism. What is a true hero, right? What is a true hero? And I can tell you, in my lifetime, I think the greatest depiction of a hero I ever saw was a guy on top of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant that had melted down and was causing radiation to just burn all over the place. And it was in total meltdown, and they had no choice. This guy had to walk on top of the roof with a hose full of concrete, and he had to pour the concrete down into the reactor, knowing he was going to get so much radiation it was going to kill him in 2 weeks. Mm. And he went up there and did it. He went up there and did it, and he went up there and did it in order to preserve mankind from that problem that had happened in that facility. Now, see, my point of view, that's my idea of a hero, okay? That's my idea of a hero. And for human beings to forsake their own personal attempt at being a hero or a heroine in doing huge things in life that are consistent with Yah's will in your life, right? Consistent with the creation that you are. As fallen and as broken as you may be, Yah has created you for a purpose, to find that purpose and to pursue it, right? The guy who spent his lifetime after his parents were killed in the Amazon jungle to go back and bring the gospel message to the very tribe that had killed his parents. This is a hero, right? This is a hero. Not the guy who's gone out and slaughtered people, not the guy who's, you know, who's the World War II ace who shot down 50 of his enemies. We're talking about somebody who stood up for mankind, who stood up for life, who stood up for the word of Yah. And you compare this to this stuff that's going on here. These guys all want to have a shortcut, and they want to go back to hearing this ancient world. And they think most of these people don't even have the slightest idea what they're engaged in. They have no idea. They just, you know, they go to some ritual, sell their soul to Satan, and then they wake up 4 years later going, what? Was there a cost to this? Yeah, there was a cost to it. And now you can't get back.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So true. Look here in this OTO, you can see the symbolism that they use here, mimicking of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, the apple, which we were speaking about, of the tree, the good and the bad. And that's that hand symbol. This is Jay-Z, what you were speaking about. None of us want to do it in case we get accused of hiding into that. But you, again, what you were saying, so that they'll sell themselves so that they can get the riches, they can get the fame, maybe not knowing. I don't think in his case it's not knowing. I think he fully knows exactly what he's doing here, bringing in those spirits, so manipulating the spirits so they can get the very best of their fame and notoriety, him and his wife. Here's so many, even all the way down to Hitler. You can see, and you mentioned Stephen earlier and Star Trek, he's here. Disappointing. You hear people commending Denzel Washington for being a man of faith and one of the greatest Christian celebrities, really, when you see it here. And all these other faces, young and old, even to our children's generation now. It's quite disappointing. And Beyonce there, Sasha Fierce, Rihanna in the way of music, you know, Zoolander, the actor who plays that there. It's just, it's upsetting, but it's not surprising. Is it what they're doing? All hidden in plain sight, all these different symbols that they have.
Excellent.
Kiss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, these guys.
So
yeah. You know, and these guys, you know, what's amazing to me about these guys is that they just weren't very good at all. I mean, they weren't very good. They weren't very good musicians, and they never did have a hit. And the only reason they're still around is because of these stupid costumes and their satanic pledge. Otherwise, they would be not. I mean, come on. What's their big hit, Jesse? What's the one that made the top 40?
Do you know all I remember for them is sticking
Not
out their
one.
tongue.
Right?
Yeah.
And you know this Gene Simmons here, the guy with the big tongue in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know where he was born?
Oh. Oh. He's
Haifa,
sort of,
Israel.
that's it. Mm.
He's an Israeli citizen, right?
Yeah.
and he is demonic to beat the band. You know, I mean, you know, and these guys, you know, it just, you know, I mean, here we go. You know, not to give any Kiss fans any grief, but I'll tell you, these guys are a waste of time. But you know, and here's something else too. When you look at the advancement of the industry, right? Advancement of the industry is designed to degrade society. Period. It was designed to defile society and to degrade society. And every step of the year, every year that they went on, they had to find another way more outrageous in the degradation. Yeah, Knights in Satan's service. Yeah, there you go. And they had to find another level to degrade the world. Well, they've succeeded. Okay. You guys wanted an immoral world. I mean, none of these people know that even when they claim that they're working on behalf of Satan and all this other stuff, they're doing the will of Yah. Because Yah has told the culture, if you do not revere me and if you do not keep my Torah and you do not walk in accordance with my Torah, then the curses of Deuteronomy 28 verses 15 forward are going to come upon you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what part of that reading don't you understand? Oh, well, that stuff, that all got nailed to the cross. That's what your pastor tells you. That all got nailed to the cross. Well, what's our sermon for today, Pastor? Do what thou wilt. What's the sermon in the Christian church, Jesse? What's the sermon in the Christian church?
That's their narrative too.
You can touch what God told you not to touch. You can taste what God told you. That's the sermon.
There it is.
Uh-huh.
There it is. And let's have the sermon this weekend be under the Nimrod tree as we celebrate. And we'll have a guest appearance by Santa, who's going to show up in his red costume, right? He's not showing up as Krampus, right? Which is the Baphomet demon that he truly is. Oh, no, he's in disguise. He's in disguise. Showing up at your church as you worship the, severed phallus of Nimrod, which is what the Christmas tree is.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Fertility.
Yeah.
Right? It's the fertility rite. And the wreath is a reproductive organ of Isis. That's what it is. And that's what's hanging all over the church walls. Oh, let's put this up. And then as soon as we pack the Christmas stuff up, we'll start working on getting our Easter eggs out for the fertility ritual in the spring. And you call yourself followers of Scripture.
Exactly.
You're a follower of Scripture, right? In doing this stuff. And so here we are. And so what's the church message? What's the church message? Do what thou wilt. So how is that inconsistent with Aleister Crowley? And who's more wicked? Crowley told you who he was.
Yes, excellent. And the Kiss here, when they paint their faces, they mimic the miming.
Yes.
They paint them faces white to let everyone know that the individual's dead and that there's something living in them.
Yes.
It's symbolic for death.
Ooh,
It's like the Day of the Dead as well. So they're channeling in, they're letting the audience know that I am dead, the singer, that something else is in me. And yes, and Gothics and all that, they believe in this. And the churches are using miming in the churches. It's just totally wicked. Yeah,
I know. And actually, this band, Gothics, Satanists, Occultists, they all have one thing in common. They believe that Hasatan was misjudged and he was kicked out unfairly of heaven. And so this is what they're fighting, or they think they're fighting,
Excellent.
Yeah. So
who are they to second guess the judgment of Yahweh?
Who
are they to second guess the judgment of Yahweh? That's a spirit of rebellion in and of itself.
Yes.
You got it wrong. I mean, that's what comes out of their mouth. You got it wrong. Did Yah really say you will surely die? He didn't tell you the truth, right? Who are you to judge the judgment of Yah? if you're going to put yourself in a place where you're judging the judgment of Yah, you are in rebellion right there.
Yeah. So true. Very profound.
And what they use, the OTO, is they also manipulate the frequencies. So you don't need the words to do a backward masking anymore, or to below the threshold of the individual's brain. It automatically decodes the hidden messages and visual messages, but even the tones. Is that when a musician completes their master copy CD, and it's then given to a scientist, and they manipulate the high frequency tones because they know we're made out of water, and these tones can manipulate water, and it just turns people into rotten fruit.
You've actually got a very good section in your video on that.
Let's talk about the technicality of that just a little bit, because I've been in the studio many, many times, and in the studio there are lots of things you can do. For instance, you can take a phrase, you could be speaking a phrase, and you talking during the whole album and putting subliminal messages in the album, straightforward. And you just reduce it in its decibels beneath the vocal, where it is, you can just barely hear it. You might be able to hear it if you really crank it up, you listen closely in really good headphones, you might be able to hear it. Otherwise, you can't hear it, but your mind is hearing it. You're not hearing it in the open consciousness, but your mind is hearing it. Okay, so that's one aspect of it. And then it's also true that most of the albums that came out of Hollywood were also blessed by a satanic priest. They would take the mastered copies over to these priests, and they would have a ritual over the album before they would press the album. Right. This was another thing. Now, these poor fellows here in AC/DC, now, the older brother, Angus Young, isn't that his name? Angus Young.
Yeah.
The guitarist with the horns on his head. His brother just died, right? Just recently. The lead singer in this picture also died. And right after he was singing Highway to Hell. Of course, one of their famous songs that was so loved at Glastonbury was Hell's Bells, right? And these young people just love to get on board with the idea of being on a highway to hell. In fact, when we were in Britain, right? We went to the tour. I don't think you were with us, Jesse. But we climbed the tour outside of Glastonbury because we were doing the research at Glastonbury. Went to the Abbey, and then we went up to the tour. And as we were climbing the tour, we came up to the passage just before we got to the steps, and there was a gal coming down from Germany, and she was in a wheelchair. And she came down, and the guy pushing the wheelchair, and she comes up and she says, "Well, I can't go up there because it's all stairs." Well, it was an absolutely horrendous climb. She would have never been able to do that in a wheelchair. No way. And I said, "Yeah, those stairs are going to make it impossible." And she said to me, "That's why I choose the wide highway to hell over the narrow stairway to heaven." That's what she said to me. And I said to her, "Has it ever occurred to you that the pathway to heaven doesn't require you to walk at all, but that you're lifted in spirit?" And she just looked at me like she had never heard that said to her before, ever. That she was just trapped in that wheelchair and cursed, right? And these boys here have brought Satan to bear more than any other band probably in the world. Yeah. And there are many people who say, well, look, when you have somebody who says, I don't, there we go. Over, led by Crosby, Stills, Nash, perform rituals over every master copy. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Now, when you're talking about these guys, seriously, when you talk about the average atheist doesn't believe in God and therefore doesn't believe in Satan. So they think this is just party language. That's what they think it is. Or we're just out having a good time doing, like, I'll tell you the one who's really notorious about it, Jack Black, right? Jack Black. He's the one that did, he did a song movie. He did School of Rock, right? Yeah. And he is openly a Satanist and loves to extol the virtue of Satanist worshiping rock bands. He'll do that, right? Okay. And he thinks it's funny. He thinks it's cute, right? He has no idea. These people have no idea. You know, go talk to Voltaire, who also said there was no such thing as Yah. Talk to Voltaire. What did his nurse say the night of his death? He never shut up. He was crying and whining and screaming and yelling, they're taking me, they're taking me, they're taking me. He could never shut his mouth because he knew that all of a sudden, when he crossed over that threshold into dying, you know, you cross over spiritually, you cross over mentally. When you start dying, you know, when you start breathing the death breath, you know, the what do they call that? The death knock, I forget what it is, but it's, you know, when you breathe, your breathing has a death knock in it. When you hit that stage, you're dying. And when you start dying, you see what's coming.
Yes.
Before you leave this world, you see what's coming. And he saw what was coming and he started screaming his head off. And he screamed all night long. She testified to it. He claimed that Christianity would be completely off the face of the earth within 20 years. Instead, his house in Paris is a Bible distribution point now.
Well, great point about death. My aunt, when she was passing away, she saw herself lying on the table and they're saying she's dead, she's gone, she's gone. And she said, if ever I don't want you to pray the next time when it's my time to go, you and your mother are not to pray. So I just want to affirm what you're saying about that death thing there. But also AC/DC, Stephen, Joe, it's Antichrist, devil's child. It doesn't mean ramp up the volume. That's the excuse that they use. And you may have seen Shane put up a little poster. He actually used to go to school with these guys because they're all Australian. They were 1 year older than him. So they were hanging out with his brother, John. And school uniform that you see him wearing is because the headmaster would say to him, you will never come to anything. So he wears that school uniform from Ashfield Boys High to say, in your face, headmaster, look where I am now. Just a little factor for you there. My school band, Ashfield High School, Sydney, is what Shane's saying there. But they're very satanic. And this one here, exactly after his song, he died. I think it was, well, they say alcohol abuse, but we know that there was more to that there. And you already covered this, the Rolling Stones, Sympathy for the Devil. Here, you know, and
the outstretched tongue, right? The outstretched tongue is an extremely important part of all of this. And you'll see photographs of all of these Satan worshiping celebrities doing the outstretched tongue, right?
Yes.
And the outstretched tongue is basically a statement, a physical statement of no sexual morality. There's no sexual constraint. That's what the outstretched tongue means. No sexual constraint.
You need to know these things because, you know, you just look on Facebook, you look on Twitter, you see people, especially people that I know still in Christendom, they'll do the finger symbols, putting their two fingers out, then they think that's just a cool symbol with their tongues out. And then you just explain what that means. We've got to wake up, smell the coffee, and not be in this pagan world and doing things of this world as well here.
The Māori culture here too, when they do the haka, they poke out their tongues.
Yes.
That's also
Yeah, there you go. The same kind of thing. And, you know, and again, you know, when we're talking, and I don't mean to offend anybody. I know some people, this is hard to deal with, having to look at this world. But all I can tell you is that when you see some of the symbolism, they are encouraging people to go down this path because, again, it is a lure, right? It is satanic deception. It is to pull you in without you knowing what's going on. It's to pull you into this without you knowing what's going on. And so the thing is, in order to understand this and in order to get free of this stuff, you know, you need to know what it is. Now, something else about this, I mean, when you talk about these artists doing this kind of thing, I'll give you another example of a sexual statement that people don't want to hear. But there used to be a tattoo called the tramp stamp. That's what they would call it, right? Which was a round tattoo on the very lower back, right? On the very lower back. And a lot of girls would put these tattoos on the very lower back, and it came to be known as a tramp stamp. But that tattoo literally means I'm public property. That's what it means. I'm public property. And, so, I mean, this is one of the things, I mean, like, I've talked about tattoos and about people not going down that path, because you say, well, I'm just going to get one tattoo. And then the next thing you know, you got two, then you got three, now you got five. Now you got a sleeve on your arm, and, but the tramp stamp is a particularly difficult tattoo. And, it's just, and again, these are the kinds of things that give you a demonstration of where these people are. Now they say, well, look where I am now. I'm well known. First of all, fame is a curse. It is not a blessing. Fame is a curse. It's not a blessing. Fame is a curse. And inordinate wealth is also a curse. Well, I've got inordinate wealth and fame. Good for you. How cursed are you? You can't go anywhere, and your wealth requires you to spend 100% of your day shepherdizing your wealth to make sure you keep it. And when you have all this wealth, what do you get from it? Oh, well, I got a house so big I need a ride vacuum cleaner to clean it. Good for you. Where do you live? You know, Bill Gates, when he built an $83 million house on Lake Washington, he never lived there. He and his wife in a tri-level 2,500 square foot house out in Hood River, or Hood River, because they wanted to live a life, right? That's normal, right? With the kitchen over there, the dining room over there, the bedroom down the hall, that kind of thing, They wanted to live that kind of life, not a life in an $83 million house. Same thing with Biltmore. Biltmore, this huge 300-room palace that Vanderbilt built. His wife couldn't live in the place. She ended up moving into the maid's quarters after he disappeared, and then eventually gave the whole house to North Carolina and said, you guys keep it. I'm moving into a regular house. So what's the wealth do for you? What's it do for you? You get to accumulate a whole ton of junk.
Mm-hmm.
All of which, by the way, decays. It all decays.
Yes.
So where are you? Where are you really, Angus Young? Where are you really? Let me tell you where are you. You wrote a bunch of satanic songs. You're in your 70s now. And in order for you to make another dime in your life, you have to go on stage and play that same boring, repetitious chord change again for the billionth time. Because you don't get to do anything new because you're a slave to the satanic world you built.
Mm. And I think he suffers from Alzheimer's now, so he can't even get up and perform. Too many shakes and so on, like that. The remaining surviving brother.
Well, he's probably good. He's probably glad that he doesn't have to play it anymore.
Very feeble now, yeah. And this is Led Zeppelin. You've already brought him up, but you can see the symbology here, and also the fallen angel right in the middle, and phallic symbols that they use to have different meanings here.
But now, once again, when you look at this, when you look at these symbols, okay, you see the mark of the Trinity there on that Led Zeppelin with the fallen angel thing.
Yeah.
And so this one on the left was Jimmy Page's sigil magic scheme. And then the one on the right, I think, was John Bonham's. And then you have John Paul Jones, and then you have Robert Plant in the middle. But these two in the middle are symbology of actually the Holy Trinity, right? So not everybody followed Jimmy Page into his black magic satanic worship stuff. And of course, John Bonham died, right? John Bonham died early. And again, it was from alcoholism. I think he was involved in a wreck. And, but, Robert Plant lost his firstborn son, and so on and so forth it goes, right? And so all of these things have they have a particularized cost. And so when we look at these things, when you look at all this stuff now, I'm not afraid of the world. I'm just going to tell you that. I don't run around being in fear of what's in the world. There's a bunch of satanic stuff out there. There's a bunch of other stuff out there. There's a bunch of history out there. It's worth knowing. However, you need to be careful. And if you don't understand what's going on, like I'll give you an example. There's a Led Zeppelin song. It's called All of My Love. That's the name of the song. And the song is open worship to a satanic demon. Okay? It is open worship to a satanic demon who will go unnamed here. But this is what Robert Plant is singing about, right? You don't know it, but I knew it. And so this is the kind of stuff that and when you're talking about Stairway to Heaven was written about the Queen. She's buying a Stairway to Heaven. It was written about the Queen, believe it or not.
Really?
But Jimmy Page was so far into his black magic and into his all that other stuff that he was doing that thing. It's ridiculous. And it was all being encouraged by who? The CIA in the United States, in order to bring a cultural revolution in the United States. And what happened to the stuff that should have been here? What happened to the quality music that should have been here? What happened to the quality musicians that should have been here? They were all kicked in the face by a bunch of Satanists running the music industry at Capitol Records, at I'm not going to name all the other record labels, but they were openly Satanist, were running most of those labels. Not all of them, but most of them were. The big ones were. So what happened to the quality musicians? Kicked in the face. Not you, not you, not you, not you, and not you. Now, eventually, we had some things happen in Europe where some musicians were able to actually come through. But it wasn't happening out of Britain, and it wasn't happening out of Hollywood, and it wasn't happening out of New York. And when true musicians would come through, they would be completely isolated very, very, very quickly. Like, I'll give you an example. You take Chick Corea and the Return to Forever group. Very high-end performers, right? They got one album out, and then we don't know you guys, right? We don't know you anymore. Go away, right? There were other musicians that were at a very high level of musicianship that the industry wasn't interested in hearing. We don't want to hear from you. I used to tour with a guy named Steve Morse. He was with a group called the Dixie Dregs. Oh, absolutely brilliant musician. And, nothing, whatever happened, have you ever heard the name Steve Morse? No, you haven't.
No.
Enough said. But you'll hear the name Gene Simmons. You'll hear Angus Young, who played about 1/5 the level of Steve Morse, maybe less, in that range. But this is what happens, right? What happened to the quality musicians? They were completely ignored in order that the satanic agenda could be fed. In order to do what? In order to bring the social order of the West, Ephraim, into ruin. It takes 3 generations. We're in that 3rd generation now. We're late in that 3rd generation. And we have arrived at total ruin, right? And I'm going to summarize this real quickly. When you talk about 1948, Alfred Kinsey published his index on human sexuality. He published his thing on human sexuality. 1953, Hugh Hefner decides a pamphleteer for Alfred Kinsey. December of 1953, publishes the first edition of Playboy magazine. The doors to pornography then begin to fall. As pornography begins to fall, Playboy Foundation began working nonstop for no fault divorce throughout the world. They succeeded, and they have completely destroyed the family. So you see, once sexual license comes in, and adultery, even in 1973, in the case of Griswold versus Connecticut, adultery, fornication, and homosexuality were felonies in the United States and all 50 states. But the sexual revolution was already underway. And the sexual revolution, when you move away from chastity as a civilization, you move into depravity. And as you move into depravity, the society falls. It takes 3 generations. But once you get to the 3rd generation, the society is completely worthless, because the society sits in front of a TV stuffing itself with potato chips all day long. That's it. There's nothing left. There's no motivation. There's no creativity. There's no robust life. There's no living. There's no standing up. There's nothing. It's over. It's done. It's finished. And all that is awaiting is the conquest army from that culture, which is chastity, will immediately supersede you and immediately eclipse you and immediately take you and everything you own. And that's where we are in the West right now. So people want to say, you keep coming at us with your moral code. You want to put us under the law, Dr. P. That's what you want to do, is put us under the law. Figure it out. Use your mind. If you don't embrace this kind of morality, you're dead.
True.
Correct. And good has become evil, and evil has become good.
Yes.
That's basically what they wanted to achieve, and we can see that.
Yeah, they got there. They got what they wanted. Now you have an open, explicit drag show, open, explicit, perverted, at a mall where children are invited to attend, at a mall.
Malls and libraries, it's happening all around, isn't it? So, yeah, very disappointing. I'm quite fascinated with what you said about the song Stairway to Heaven being dedicated to the Queen. I'm so surprised at that, because when I was looking into this and watching some of your information, Joe, you had put down that backwards it says "My Sweet Satan," and it's a whole worship song to him. And then you've brought in that other factor of it being dedicated to the Queen. So it just shows you how deep this goes, honing in on these wicked spirits. But I want to thank you, gentlemen. It's been a really delightful, very, very important discussion today. Very much so, because people are singing all these songs come around Christmas time, around those decorations you spoke about, and they ask, why do you take the stand that you do? And I thought it was important to bring it into perspective and relate it to all the different generations who would watch this and who are part of that one family. So let's just go with Galatians 6. It simply sums up everything. For he who sows to the flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And that is our prayer, and that is our desire for everybody who has the mind, the ears, and the sight to hear what we have said today. So we bless you in the name of Yahuwah HaMashiach, and we will see you next time. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Stephen.
Good, Joe. Good seeing you, good brother. Blessings to you. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, Stephen.
Two people laughed. Two people cried. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Ever seen a blind man cross the road trying to make the other side, baby? Ever seen a young girl growing old trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there, somewhere.